Welcome to the Thriving Misfits, the podcast where we celebrate resilience, embrace diversity, and challenge norms. I'm your host, Fyiona Young, and I'm thrilled to introduce Mary Foxworth, an inclusive intimacy educator and the visionary founder of the Foxworth Institute. Mary is on a powerful mission to close the knowledge gaps in sexual health, intimacy, and relationship education so that people from all walks of life can build more empowered, connected, and authentic relationships. She's also a Tetler Front and Female Awards Hong Kong 2024 nominee, recognized for her leadership in driving bold, inclusive conversations where they're needed the most. Get ready for an honest, enlightening, and deeply human conversation that challenges norms and celebrates the diversity of intimacy. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, Fyiona. I'm excited for our chat.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good.
Fantastic. I'm good. Now let's kick it off with some icebreaker questions. So, if intimacy were a dish, what would be yours and why?
That is a great question. I love to think about intimacy in the context of food because we want intimacy to be something that is delicious, that is moreish, that we want to have again and again. For me, my preferred dish would actually be ice cream, which might be unusual because ice cream is cold, but I think for me that dish represents intimacy because it's comfortable and it's delicious and it makes me feel good, and it's very, for me anyway, even though I probably am a bit lactose intolerant, it's, as I said, something comfortable. You know, it makes me feel safe when I eat it, and it's pleasure oriented for me. So that would be my dish. Yeah.
Great. I mean, who does not love ice cream, right? It already starts when you're young. So, when I first met you, I thought that your line of work was extremely, not only interesting, but quite unique. I'm sure that you probably get a lot of hilarious, awkward questions. So can you remember one of the more hilariously awkward questions that you've ever been asked in your line of work?
That's a good question. I actually get asked that quite a bit because people are very curious. And look, I would say that I don't kiss and tell. So for me, it's one of those things where it's like, they say there's no such thing as a stupid question. And when you work in the field of human sexuality and intimacy and relationships, it's very important for me to always keep that ethos. I will say that having spoken to some school students, I've definitely had some more unusual questions. But definitely no such thing as a stupid question, because even when a question is asked and it's intended to be a joke, I always think, there's probably a bit of truth to that. And those questions, I think they typically tend to be around like anal sex. And I think that is reflective of an education gap, especially for young people, but also for adults. So I always keep a straight face. And I would say I don't kiss and tell. So I will keep the confidentiality of my clients for that one. But there's just a bit of a hint in there about what those questions might be.
Right. Now, how did your upbringing actually shape your understanding of relationships, intimacy, or inclusion? You're heavily focused on inclusive intimacy as well. Were they very present or actually absent?
That's a really good question. So I actually grew up in a very religious Catholic family. We went to church every Sunday, and I went to Catholic schools. So I had very, I would say, grounding relationship values in terms of the nuclear family. But I always felt that my education and my experiences within that social construct and community were very limited, very narrow. And it wasn't until I made it to university and I also came to Hong Kong as an adult that I could see a lot of the gaps that were actually missing within traditional, more conservative, I would say, sexuality education. And it wasn't until I started practicing and actually working one on one with clients that I could actually piece together several gaps that I not only recognized in the experience of my clients, but also in myself, identifying as someone who is neurodivergent. So, yeah, I would say it's a series of, a conservative, traditional upbringing, very religious, to then embarking on my own journey and understanding, not just for how I work with clients, but also for myself. And yeah, I think there's more to that as well around, the family that I've come from and recognizing neurodivergent traits in my family members who are, seeking diagnoses themselves, and myself too with my own evaluation, that I've also begun to see what we considered to be problematic traits, particularly in the context of relationships, now I can recognize are actually presentations
Now,
of
was there
neurodivergent
a
behavior.
Right. Now, was there a particular moment in your childhood that you feel it really planted the seed for the work that you're doing today?
Yeah. I don't know. It's a really good question. I think we don't often reflect on our childhood and how it influences our careers. Well, I certainly don't. But I would say that maybe subconsciously, this experience has influenced my path and passion. When I was in kindergarten and I was 3 years old, there was a boy in my 3-year-old kinder who had, actually, I'm not sure what the cognitive disability was, but he definitely had a cognitive disability. And we would talk to each other through sign language. And I think I probably had a bit of a crush on him. And I think that, yeah, I had an experience from a really young age trying to communicate with someone, to understand them and express emotion. And, I was like 3, but that experience
Mm.
sort of maybe subconsciously shaped how I see intimacy and connection from an inclusive perspective. I'm not sure. I've never spoken to a therapist about that memory, so I don't really know. But that's what I think of when I'm asked about an early childhood experience, especially from an inclusive perspective. So yeah.
I mean, it's great that you can still remember a childhood experience all the way back when you were 3 years old. That's amazing. Now, I know that you come from a corporate world like myself, and then you pivoted into something as bold and personal as intimacy education, what you're doing now. So, what gave you the courage to pivot?
Courage is a very strong word. I'm not sure if it was courage. I think I worked in corporate for at least 6 years with one employer in banking, which, especially in Hong Kong, is a very professional and also very conservative environment. And it's not conservative in a negative way. I think it needs to be this way for a variety of reasons. But I felt that after several years working in this environment, I felt an erosion in the connection that I had with peers, with colleagues, because everything has to be passive. Everything needs to be, to an extent, inauthentic. It's very hard to develop real connections with people in a corporate environment. And again, there are reasons for this, but I felt that definitely took a toll on my mental well-being. During the pandemic as well, I'm looking for connection. I want to have conversations with people. In the end, I just felt it wasn't the right environment for me. But I also was able to gain that knowledge and experience from a corporate environment where I could see how many people were struggling from not having healthy relationships at home, from not being able to have open dialogue about real human issues in the workplace. And it's very difficult to open up those conversations if you're not a professional in the field or an expert. And I think as well, particularly in Hong Kong and Asia, there are added cultural complexities to these conversations. So I think there were many push and pull factors. And in the end, I just thought I've demonstrated a commitment to something, projects, a workplace. I've got the degrees. I have enough under my belt that I felt like I had proved to myself that I was capable. And I also had professional experience that I knew I could leverage for a business. And I think that all of these things combined gave me the confidence to leave and to pursue something that I felt was right for my personality and what I wanted to offer the community more broadly. It's a very long answer to your question. Sorry.
It definitely resonates with me because for me, I was 14 years also in a very traditional conservative industry, oil and gas. After 14 years, taking the leap into entrepreneurship, doing what I'm doing right now, I think for me, people do ask me as well, like what made you actually take the leap? And I always like to share that in such a way that I know what my values are. I'm very value driven. Not only when I was working in corporate or not only in my professional life, but also in my personal lives. And for me, it's all about integrity, enthusiasm, and growth. So if I don't get that, whether in my professional or personal life, I just don't think I can thrive. I think the other thing is also knowing, of course, your skills, your talents, and who you want to support, right? Like, who is your target audience? Who do you feel, who are the communities that you can help with your expertise? I think all of these kind of like, when you look at a Venn diagram, that's like the sweet spot. And I would call that the purpose, right? Like, that's why we wake up every single morning. And that's why even, during the pandemic, small businesses usually wouldn't survive, or even bigger businesses. But I think when you love what you're doing, you build up that resilience and you get through even the tough times. So, I would like to hear more about, intimacy challenges, because we all face them. I'm with my husband, partner for about 20 years now, married for more than 12 years. What are some of the most common intimacy challenges that couples face, especially during the pre and postnatal phases, that we also don't talk about enough?
Yes, that's a great question. Pre and postnatal is a specific area of interest for me, just because I feel there is a lot of positive work to do to actually empower couples to enjoy the journey, but also be educated about what some of the common challenges are, because a lot of couples will experience the same challenges, but in the pre and postnatal space, everything is geared towards, the health of a birthing partner, but also, the birth itself And then after birth, caring for the baby. So it's really not so much about caring for each other, the birthing partners, and also understanding that, changes in intimacy are very normal and they're very common. And so, yeah, this has been an area of interest for me. And the common challenges, I think, we could break that down into, each trimester will have common, quite specific challenges that are physiological, but also psychological, and they also impact social dynamics. And there's a lot to break up into the prenatal. And then for postnatal as well, I think similar physiological, psychological, but there's also an emphasis on, I think, mental health as well for the postnatal experience. So if we jump back to the prenatal, for each trimester, when we talk about the physiological changes, we have nausea, there's weight gain as well. We also have breast enlargement. There's vasocongestion as well. We have more blood in the genital area for a birthing partner. But we also have experiences for each trimester that are relevant to a partner, and they can actually be quite similar. So some of the common challenges that I mentioned, I think people are quite familiar with, and they all impact intimacy differently. And I think as well, when we talk about these physiological and psychological challenges, that directly impacts communication as well. How do we actually talk about these changes? How do we talk about these transitions? And if we bring intersectionality into this, if you are neurodivergent as well, your hormonal fluctuations will also be different. And this can also impact communication. So even though we have common established challenges, like I've mentioned, they can be further compounded by intersectionality. But I think, if I can remember your question correctly, I think part of the question was like, what are the common challenges that we don't talk about? Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So in my experience, I feel that the common challenges that we don't talk about, because I think many of those challenges that I mentioned, a lot of people are familiar with, but the common challenges we don't talk about are also how, when we look at the context of a relationship, how a partner experiences these changes as well, because they do. And there's new research coming out which does talk about the hormonal fluctuations in a partner that can actually mirror the birthing mother. Yeah. And that also includes weight gain, elevated prolactin, which is a hormone that is necessary, which women are flooded with typically after birth, and that creates breast milk. But prolactin is also a libido suppressant. And actually, there's research that male partners can also experience a spike in prolactin, which is also a libido suppressant for men. So, yeah, so I think some of the gaps are to do with what we don't talk about for a partner. And the emphasis, I think rightly so, is still on the birthing mother. But when we talk about intimacy and a relationship, we need to think about the dynamic between two people. And so all of these changes definitely impacts the way that connection is felt. And sexual intimacy is one part of intimacy that I focus on. So certainly there's a lot of established research that says in the prenatal stage, it's different for each trimester, but certainly sexual intimacy is impacted. And it's further impacted postnatally because, of course, now you have a baby. So you have other priorities. And this is typically a common stress for couples as well. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of guilt and shame around how sexual intimacy is impacted. And so part of my role is also to broaden our understanding of intimacy so that we don't put as much pressure on just sexual intimacy to enjoy connection in a relationship. I don't want to go too off script, but I've thrown a lot out there.
No, I think that's really great. Yeah, I mean, especially for couples who have been together for quite some time already, and then all of a sudden you have a new joiner in the family. A lot of it is thrown off, and you're just like day by day trying to survive. And especially for breastfeeding mothers, they are just feeling so touched out that they don't want anyone else to touch them, right? So I think, and then of course the hormones and all of these things, and trying to bounce back. But then again, I think you will never bounce back to who you were prior to conceiving your baby. You will be, you have to accept your new identity. But at the same time, we always hear that we need to bounce back. We need to lose weight. We need to go back to work. And there's just so much pressure on mothers, huh?
I agree. There's too much pressure, and it's completely unnecessary, I think. And there's a lot of pressure on partners as well. You touched on identity. That's something else that I meant to raise as well. It's a common stressor for intimacy because it's such a huge transition from being a couple in a relationship to then being parents. And the identity shift can be very different for male and for female partners. And for male partners as well, I don't think we talk about the transition to parenthood or to fatherhood enough, and the impact that can have on identity and psychological stress as well. Typically that's associated with financial stress, but there can be other added anxieties and fears, just like there might be for a birthing mother. And we know now with new research that 1 in 10 birth partners, regardless of sex, will actually develop postnatal depression. And I believe for birthing mothers, it's around 1 in 4. So there is new research coming out around the partner's experience, which is relevant to my work as well when we look at a relationship and healthy dynamics. But I feel that this is also an area which is not spoken about enough, and is a common challenge. So yeah, I just thought I would highlight that too.
No, I think that's absolutely relevant, for you to share. And I think that also as a couple, you tend to sometimes feel that you're not husband and wife or in a partnership anymore. You're more like roommates, right?
Right. Yes, so, it's very, very common. Yes, to have that feeling. And I mean, there's a lot of different ways to navigate this. But for me, being inclusive, I definitely don't have a one size fits all approach, because I might be working with an adult. Everyone is different. I might be working with an adult who also has cognitive differences, who may also have trauma that is coming up now that they are a parent. So there are lots of different ways that intimacy can be impacted after birth as well. So just highlighting that too.
Now, what would you recommend to couples who they still do obviously love each other? There is still a close emotional connection, but they feel physically distant. They feel like they are roommates. They're just talking about logistics, right? Like, oh, we need to buy this and that. Milk powder is getting out of stock, and all of these logistical things. So are there any practical recommendations that you would give couples after having a baby in order to close that physical distance gap?
Yeah, that's a great question. In my opinion, one of the best things couples can do is have open communication, which sounds very simple, but sometimes you need to take time as an individual to really reflect on how you're feeling and why. Gosh, the weather outside is so bad. I hope you can still hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
But
all
yeah,
good.
Good, good. Making sure that you actually schedule time for regular check-ins. And scheduling does not sound very exciting, but making sure that you prioritize that time, because when you have a baby, you will deprioritize yourselves naturally. Not everyone will, but certainly some couples will. So making sure, hey, maybe on a Friday morning or a Sunday morning, um, when you can actually sit down together, when you know that your baby is sleeping, that is the time where we're just going to check in and just say, how are you feeling? How are you going? What do you need? How can I make you feel good? Is there anything that I could be doing to make you feel good? And I think that they are the opportunities where you can actually discuss more readily or comfortably sexual intimacy as well, if you're psychologically prepared and you also give yourself a safe space together to do that. And the reason why I say that that safety is important is because if your partner is not prepared for the conversation, they may feel they may feel that they're being attacked, that they're not ready to engage, that someone is expecting something of them that they're not ready yet to offer. They may feel insecure. It may raise anxieties, and that's why I definitely encourage the scheduling time for open conversation. And then on top of that, it's really important for people to broaden their understanding of intimacy. And we're very, I guess, programmed by our culture to associate intimacy with physical touch and with physical sexual intimacy. But there are other ways that we can bring connection into a relationship, such as spending time together, whatever that might be for a couple, aesthetic intimacy, doing things or finding ways that you can bring beauty and creativity and art into your home so that you can still connect with something together that you enjoy, even if it's listening to music that you love, cooking something together if you have the time, which I know is really hard when you have a baby, but thinking more broadly about intimacy and also taking the pressure off, if it is physical intimacy, penetrative intimacy, especially because after birth, obviously there's like the medically recommended 12 weeks generally. I think it varies between 8 to 12, but I definitely err on 12 medically. Or when you're signed off by a medical professional, I should say. That they'll tick a box and say, oh, you're ready for physical sexual intimacy now. But actually, emotionally, you might need more time than that. So being able to talk about, what your needs are, even if you still want to engage sexually, that doesn't focus on penetrative sex for whatever reason. It might still be painful, in which case you should definitely follow up with a physiotherapist or a doctor. But there might just be underlying birth trauma that needs to be dealt with. It can be so many variables for a birth experience as well, that making sure that you take the pressure off penetrative sex and really talk about what needs are and how they can be met. They would be my suggestions.
I mean, I really like the recommendation around scheduling time, because if it's, for me personally, definitely, if it's not in my calendar, it's not going to happen. But I think it's also about creating that habit even before the child is born. So I would say that we should already check in with each other even before baby's arriving. And then it's gonna become second nature as part of, the routine. And, what are your thoughts around preparing couples for this emotional and also relational shift of parenthood? Is there anything that we're doing at all right now in our society? What would your recommendation be to prepare couples for what's coming?
Yeah, I think, now I'm over 7 months pregnant. So I have I have my own perspectives on the medicine that I would dish out. I've tasted it. And I think the first thing, that I could suggest, and the advice that I've taken for myself, is really just to take the pressure off. And I think that, a lot of people are socially conditioned to feel, especially women, that we need to be providers, we need to be givers, we need to be offering sexual intimacy, we need to be, maintaining that even when we don't want to, which is obviously something that as a culture we need to unpack more broadly as well, and how the media reinforces those messages. But I just think the best thing is to take the pressure off and to understand that it's very normal for intimacy to change, and that doesn't mean it will be like that forever. And you'll know when there's a time when you'll feel you want to reconnect, or the desire may come back. And if it doesn't come back, then that's definitely something worth talking about. Again, going back to thinking about, as an individual, what your needs are and how your partner can actually support you. Because I feel that that is the biggest communication gap. Many partners, especially partners of birthing mothers, don't know what the birthing mother wants. They don't know what they can do to make them feel good, and they still want to be connected. So I feel that being able to have these open conversations is so important.
Absolutely.
And take the pressure off. Yeah, yeah. It's very normal. And,
Yeah, I mean,
it's not spoken about enough, I feel.
I absolutely agree. I mean, it sounds simple, but then all the simple things are not always easy to implement, right? But I guess it's worth a shot. And I mean, sometimes I hear couples, they feel that a baby or child would actually make their marriages better. But I would say you better have a good foundation before you even think about bringing another soul onto this earth.
Yeah, I think, you know, regardless of how prepared we feel, we change a lot during the birth experience. And it's a very personal journey. And as I said, it can bring up unpleasant memories for some people. It can be quite emotionally and mentally challenging. So having a strong foundation is ideal. But even if you feel that maybe your relationship, ooh, did you hear that thunder? So loud. Even if you feel your relationship is not rock solid, it's an opportunity for something new, for a transition. So you might actually find that you're stronger because you've been through something. I don't know. I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but I feel like there are still different ways to look at it. And
Absolutely.
there's also a lot of anxiety around parenthood, where people will doubt themselves and how capable they are. So
Yeah.
that's why having a good support network is also really important. Not just the relationship that you have with a partner, but the relationship that you have with yourself, with other people that you might need to rely on, friends, family, to be there for you as well, is equally as important.
I mean, there's just so much pressure, as you said. Just take the pressure off. That would be the easiest thing. But again, we're hit by social media and all of the things that you see on the feed of perfect mothers like being able to have everything. And
Yeah.
I think it's also kind of like trying to understand that everyone parents differently, and
Mm-hmm.
what may work for someone's family may not actually work for yours.
Mm-hmm.
And just realizing that we don't have to be that picture perfect mother or family or parents. And I think it's also challenging because our generation, millennials, we are so aware of the generational traumas, and we try really hard to break that cycle. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
when we become overwhelmed on a day-to-day basis because baby's whining again, or the toddler is just going having another tantrum, and then we lash out, we yell, and I think we beat up ourselves even more because of that awareness, and we try to
Mm-hmm.
avoid that generational trauma, want to break the cycle. And I think we're being even harder on ourselves. At least that's my personal experience.
Hmm. I absolutely agree. I think there's so much added pressure and anxiety that's coming from social media, which is obviously a huge part of our culture today, and also other pressures like you mentioned. But yeah, I think speaking more personally, and this is sort of intimacy related. I'm just trying to keep it all relevant. Um, I have felt a lot of pressure whilst being pregnant to be fit, to, go to the gym, to like stay fit and strong. And, I just also want to be like a bit fat and enjoy it. And I want to eat what I want. Like I don't want to go to a gym. I'm not going to a gym. I feel a bit guilty about that. And of course, my body has changed a lot. I've put on a lot of weight. It's partly to be expected, but it's also because, I'm not, and I never was part of like a fitness health culture. Like I don't know, it's just not my thing. I still want to be
Mm.
healthy and I still go to the gym like on my own, but I certainly felt like there's a culture of fitness around birth now, which I do think is, has a lot of benefits. I think that if women want to access that knowledge to be fit and strong in a safe way, all the power to them. But that doesn't mean that there's not pressure, from social media to still look a certain way when you are pregnant. Which, yeah, I think that's something that I've had to unpack in terms of how culture has influenced my birth experience or prenatal experience. And you also have to pick and choose, I would say, just because the option is there, maybe it's a good one, whether it's like physio or like what you should do, you know, to, I don't know, all sorts of things, breastfeed, for
Mm.
instance. Um, then I think you also need to feel confident to make those decisions for yourself. That we do have autonomy, and just because someone on the internet is telling you it's the right thing, that doesn't mean it's the right thing for your culture. That doesn't mean it's the right thing for you or your family. So I think reminding ourselves that we have autonomy over how we choose to live our lives, and of course, still wanting to make the best choice, the healthiest choice for ourselves and our families, is ultimately a decision that we make for ourselves. So, yeah, I feel like that's probably a more personal story I can share about that sort of pressure. And finding your own path is really important.
Now, I'm just going to ask you one more last question here. If you could leave the listeners with a killer advice, with one truth or your truth about love, connection, intimacy, what would that be?
Oh, that's a great question. um, hmm. Look, I think definitely with intimacy and with love as well, there is not a one size fits all approach, especially coming from the perspective of someone who also cares for a neurodivergent experience and how someone might experience intimacy and relationship being different from their heteronormative, neurotypical experience. I think that everyone's experience of love, however we want to communicate that, is valid. And it's important to remember that we don't have to behave a certain way in order to be loved, in order to experience love, and to show our feelings for another person. So I just want to, take the opportunity to remind people of that, because especially if you're autistic, if you're an ADHD adult, there might be many different ways that you want to creatively express emotion, and they're all valid.
Amazing, Mary. It's been long awaited, this podcast episode for sure.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for, generously sharing your stories from your beginnings in the corporate world to now founding the Foxworth Institute. And I feel really boldly stepping into the world of inclusive intimacy education, which is quite unique, especially in this part of the world. You've shown us that intimacy is not just about romance, sex, or relationships. I think it's really about that safety, identity, and having the courage to show up as our full selves. So to all our listeners, if this episode resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe to the Thriving Misfits so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And if you found value in this conversation, make sure you rate and review the podcast. Really helps more misfits like you to find us and also start their own journey of growth. And of course, please share this episode with someone who might need to hear it. Let's spread the word and empower more people to thrive in their uniqueness. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Thriving Misfits.